Hi, welcome back to another episode of Coldstream Rod Shop. I'm Derek Fraser. In this week's video, we're going to be working on Brenda's Roadster. As I mentioned in the last video at the end, the Flathead engine arrived for it. We've got an S10 transmission. The engine's fully rebuilt. We still need to get a clutch for it, but right now the big thing is I want to get the transmission mounted on the engine, have that situated in the chassis, work out the transmission mount, decide whether we're going to go with a hydraulic actuator clutch or a mechanical, so kind of have to sort that out. We also got the firewall for it last week. We're going to have to get a firewall gasket eventually. And then also over on the Camera Ladies Roadster, we've got the body cleaned down 90%. It's almost ready to come off of the frame. I do want to make one other piece for it. Last week we made one of the two sheet metal pieces that the seat sits on. We made the one that the back rests against, but then we also have to make one across the bottom here where the bottom of the seat goes on. So going to do that this week and then finish smoothing out and preparing the metal and get the body up on the sawhorses over here so that we can get the thing in an epoxy primer. So anyways, follow along. We're still working on 32 Roadsters. So we're back to work on the 32 Ford Roadster, and basically the next step I want to do is build the seat support that goes along the bottom here that the lower cushion sits on. I don't have an original to go off of. I do have some measurements from a friend for an original, and I've got some pictures that I'm going off on the internet. So the first step actually is to make the piece. It's tapered. It goes from here up to this point, and then if you see these screw holes here, it'll actually screw into these holes. I think it's 1 5/8 in the back, and it's 2 3/4 inch in the front, and it just tapers up straight like this and rounds the corner. So I've done a little bit of work already. Got a piece of 18 gauge sheet metal here and laid it out. As you can see here, it was a little difficult to get this radius, but essentially you just keep putting it on a shrinker until you get the right shape at the right location. So that's one piece. That will go right there like that. Now I got to tweak it a little bit, maybe make another one. And also I guess I failed to mention, as far as I can tell from the originals, it was made up in 3 pieces. There's a right and a left piece like this, and then a piece that goes across the front, and then it's riveted in the front here. So we're going to try and make it close to that. I mean, it's going to be covered up because the bottom seat is going to sit on top of it. But, you know, the intent here is to try and make it as close to the original as possible. So follow along. We're going to try and make up another one for the other side, and we're going to be doing 2 of these at least. So here's the 2 sets of the lower seat support sides I've made up. Sorry, struggling with words, had to describe them, but anyways, we're still making the lower seat support. So I've got a right and a left for both for the 2 sets, and now what I've got to do is figure out how to make the piece that goes between them. As I said, it's made into 3 pieces, so I did some playing around, and essentially what I came up with was I was going to make a piece of channel, I guess you would call it, out of 18 gauge, and what I wanted it to do is be able to have this piece fit inside of this one on either side, and then ultimately what I want to do, if I can show it here, is then make lots of noise here, sorry. Then I'm just going to go across the front like that, and then I'll put 2 holes here and basically do spot welds to hold it in place. Now to make this, the section that goes inside of this is actually smaller. So what I did, I took a flat piece of sheet metal first, took it over to the bead roller, and then used my 1/8 step dies to basically push this to make this all the way around on a flat sheet. I couldn't do it when it was bent, so you have to do it before you form the channel with it. So I did this all the way around on both ends, and then went over to the metal brake and then form this. And then what I found, so because this is a lower level than what it is, there's excess material here. So I then had to go over to the shrinker and actually shrink these ends. So this piece here will now fit inside there. So what I'm going to do now, I'm going to make a full length piece to the right length. There's some holes that we have to put in the bottom here to fit it inside the car, and then we'll be on to the next step. There's a lower seat support installed on the Finalizing Roadster. In the front, down in the bottom, we've got the Ford favorite 12-24 screws, or these should be nuts probably. There's 3 of them that hold it along the bottom. And then I didn't rivet these in, but I don't know if you can see that or not. Actually, we'll switch around to this side, maybe lighting's better. But basically did my little spot welds here where there would have been rivets. So the sides are actually welded in now. And that kind of finishes off the lower seat support. I did make up a second one sitting here, right there. So we did 2 of them. So this one will go on the International Roadster along with the rear piece. What we'll do is, before I put them over there with it, once we epoxy prime the camera lady's body here, I'm going to epoxy prime those pieces so that they'll be covered when I put them over there with the International Roadster body. Next up, I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to tackle putting the S10 transmission on the back of the Flathead, and then positioning the Flathead in Brenda's Roadster's chassis. I've got a rear transmission support there. We'll get that in, probably have to retap those holes because they're full of paint and whatnot, and then sort out a rear transmission mount. Hopefully I can go to the local car dealer or car part shop, CarQuest in this case for us, and could be Napa or Riley's, wherever you're at. But it's a common transmission rubber support that goes on the back of the transmission. If I'm not mistaken, the snout on this, I'm going to have to trim, I think it's 3/8 of an inch off the end of that, because it's too long when it goes into the back of the Flathead there. So anyways, I'm going to get that all ready. We've got to do a few more things. And I've got to drill out those holes to 1/2 inch so that they'll mate up with these bolts here. So anyways, going to work on that. We'll get that positioned and put it in the chassis and show you in a few minutes. Here is the Flathead with the S10 T5 transmission on it, sitting in Brenda's chassis right now. The chassis was built to take a Flathead. I'm not sure what transmission mount was on it. It looks like it might have been set up for a T5 transmission, but I've seen them look like that for C6s as well. So, but nevertheless, in the front, the Flathead mounts are in the right position. We've got clearance for the steering arms, and then the headers that were supplied with it. We're clearing the Vega steering box. Also in the back, I wasn't able to get a transmission rubber mount. It's on order. It's all of like $11, but it'll be in tomorrow, so we'll put that in tomorrow. One thing I did have to do was, there was a large chunk of casting here that stuck out on the top of the S10 T5 transmission. I had to cut that off before when I put it in another vehicle. It's just excess material. And then along the bottom, there's a spot. I don't know if you can see it or not, but it's hopefully I can do it justice. There's a piece here that sticks way down. We cut that off as well, just to kind of make it look a little bit better. Now, I'm going to lean more towards probably hooking up a hydraulic clutch as opposed to a mechanical one. I'm sure that I can make some sort of a bell crank or something that will activate this, but I think a quicker method would be to hook up like a slave cylinder on a bracket here, and then put a hydraulic clutch master cylinder here. I have a donor slave cylinder over on the bench over there. I'm going to look at it later to see what we can do with that. But there was no issues actually bolting the T5 up to the Flathead. I didn't have to cut the shaft. It just went in, had enough clearance. So We'll see later when we put the clutch and the actual pilot bearing in it for sure, but it's a quick fix to do if you have to do it. It's usually like 3/8 of an inch to 400 thou you've got to cut off. So right now, kind of happy with the way it's sitting in the chassis. Not looking like I'm going to have to do any weird work or anything like that. The exhaust, later on I might straighten this pipe out a little bit so it comes down, but we'll get onto that later. So for now, it's sitting in the chassis. And I had to free up the engine stand because I needed to take the engine stand and then lift the camera lady's Roadster body off the chassis, get it onto the sawhorses, and actually finish off the metal cleaning stuff so that we can get that epoxy prime this week. That absolutely has to be done. So there's the camera lady's Roadster body off of the chassis. I made a little quick wooden support to go inside to lift it up with the engine hoist. So I'm going to take that off. A few things I'm going to take off. The door latches on the inside. And then I'm not sure whether, or more than likely, I'm going to take the doors off and paint those separately. We'll see. And then what I've got to finish doing, of course, is prepping the metal on the outside. The wheel wells have got to be done. And I've got to go up underneath and clean the underneath of it. It's not going to take a whole lot to get it ready to epoxy prime. Then I'll wipe it all down and then start the process. Like I said, a bunch of other pieces we've got to epoxy prime after we do the body. But for now, she's ready to go. I had to do a lot of shuffling to move things out of the way. So everything's jammed up in the corner over there, so that when I drop the curtains for my little makeshift paint booth, I won't get any overspray anywhere. So anyways, we're going to carry on here, and we're getting moving. So we finally got the camera lady's Roadster in the first 2 coats of epoxy primer. It's inside my makeshift booth here right now. Got basically 2 coats on the bottom, one kind of really good coat on the inside all the way around, and then I've got 2 coats on the outside. Now, because of the tight quarters and the way I had to spray on the inside, I'm going to have to do some touch-up tomorrow because I couldn't quite reach some stuff. So right now I'm kind of happy with the way it's turned out so far. No real runs or anything. Some of the hard to get to places I was able to get to and get good coverage on. Probably need a bigger booth or consider going to a paint shop, but we're making do with this. So anyway, making progress. We finally got her an epoxy primer, and hopefully we'll get the final touch-up stuff underneath tomorrow. And then in the following days, I'll take the body out, and then what I'll do is I've got some parts here for the International Roadsters that we'll put some epoxy primer on. The deck lid, I've got to hang that up and do inside and out. And then for Brenda's Roadster, we've got a firewall there that's bare. I'll prep that up and I'll have to epoxy prime that. And of course there's the cowl vent and the little tunnel I've got to put epoxy primer on. So booth is going to be working for the next couple days. And anyways, right now we're going to clean up for the night and let that dry and then turn the fans off, and that's it for tomorrow, till tomorrow. It's the next day, and everything still looks good. Everything hardened up like it should. I had 1 or 2 little runs there in the back. Probably, if I was a better painter, probably could have avoided them, but we're just gonna touch those up. Not that you absolutely have to. You can sand those out later, but I kind of just a little bit picky. There's 1 or 2 little nooks and crannies that I just want to cover. Just because when I was getting inside and spraying, I didn't get them around the seat riser there, and then up underneath there. I want to get that, put a coat of epoxy primer on that. And then the other thing is that I moved the sawhorses out further, so I'm going to spray the areas up underneath where I couldn't get at when the sawhorses were there. I'm not sure if you can see, there's just one little strip there that I've got to do. In the back, I didn't have to worry about that because what I did, I set the body on some studs, and the studs are sitting on top of the sawhorses, so that was, I could still spray from both sides underneath. Now, one tip I was given by a viewer, and I actually was told it before, with these PPS cups, you can fill them up, put them on the gun, and then what you do, you turn it upside down, and then you press on the bottom of the cup, and you force all of the air out of it through the nozzle. And when you do that, you can actually spray with this setup upside down. It works. I was told it before, and I got reminded in the last video that I did that you can actually do that. Thank you. I can't remember who it was, but you're absolutely right, and it absolutely works. So anyways, we're going to carry on with this. We're going to get the underneath touched up and those 1 or 2 spots inside. It won't take long. And then the plan is to get the body and put it on a cart. And actually set it just off to the side while we go, and we'll work on epoxy priming the other parts over the next day or 2. Here is the camera lady's Roadster body out of the paint booth. Got it set up for now on a little mobile cart. Kind of jury rigged it up with some wheels and some 2x4s and some metal posts there to go up and hold it against the body. That way it stays up off of the 2x4s, so it's got like, it's sitting on washers and some 3/8 bolts. It's pretty stable, and it's going to allow me to move it around the shop a little more easier as we work on one thing on the other. So for now, the body's going to stay off of the chassis. I'm going to do a little bit of chassis work on hers over the next few weeks or months. A few things to do. I want to finish running the exhaust. More than likely make some brake lines up and stuff like that, just the standard stuff before we start taking that apart and getting that ready for paint. So in the booth right now, what I've got is, like I said, I had to paint the deck lid and the other firewall separately. So right now I've got one side done, that was done last night. And then I'm going to flip them over and do the other side. It is a little cold outside today. We had like a heavy frost and some, might look like a little bit of snow overnight. So going to have to warm things up in here first before I finish these off. And then hopefully once those are off, we can roll up the paint booth and get back to the other work. Well, finally get everything all epoxy primed and got the big plastic walls all rolled up. Everything is it's dry now. I'm just going to let it set up for a little while. The extra set of seat risers and seat support for the International Roadster, I epoxy primed those. I got on both sides. That's going to go over into the International Roadster, and it'll be there until we start it back up again. And then the firewall for Brenda's Roadster, we got that all epoxy primed with 2 coats, and then the deck lid for the camera lady's Roadster, we've got 2 coats of epoxy prime on both sides. So going to clean things up here a little bit. I'll leave the heat on for a while and wait for that to set up good. You can touch it right now, but I just like to leave it sit for a while. And then of course the Roadster's on the cart. One thing I also did over here on Brenda's Roadster, we got the Flathead insulator pucks in right now. These are really nice ones. They look like the Bob Drake style ones. They've got the metal inserts on the inside. They're not like the ones I bought off of eBay. These are pretty good insulators. I'm not sure how many turns to put on this nut before you put the cotter pin in. I've got to ask before I actually tighten the cotter pin. So that's in. And then in the back, I mentioned we had to go out and buy a transmission mount. So the transmission mount, it's not a big deal to put in, but it was when I bought it, it was actually a single stud on the bottom. I don't know if you can see that or not. So I had to take the metal transmission mount off in order to put the insulator in. And of course, it being mid 80s or 90s GM, it was all metric bolts. So we had to chase down some metric bolts to bolt it into the transmission and a metric nut on the bottom there. So Anyways, that's all tidied up now. We are waiting for some more exhaust parts. We've got 2-inch stainless steel exhaust pipe. We're going to pick up the mufflers for it probably tomorrow and then get on to working on that. I'm not sure there's going to be anything else for this video, but that may be it. We'll see. Depends on how tomorrow goes. So anyway, follow along. We're still working on the Roadsters. So didn't get too much more done as far as work on the projects, but one of the things I had to do was basically rearrange the garage again. We've got the camera lady's 32 Roadster body, the deck lid back on it, and it's sitting here next to the door, and the chassis is right behind it. I had to drag out the original 32 Ford frame because it's going to go over in the other building with another one because we needed to free up the space at the back of the garage. And as well, kind of wanted to just rearrange where the engines were to shove them against the wall. We've got our spare Cleveland motor. We've got the 331 Cadillac for the International Roadster, and then we've got the 272 Y block that we will ultimately put into the camera lady's Roadster. Also, like on this episode, we got a couple things done, putting the Flathead in, getting the mounts in place, and then, epoxy priming the firewall that's for it. And the other thing today, we went on a road trip today. Had an opportunity to pick up a piece of equipment to kind of up the game, so to speak, or whatever. A friend had this 48-inch brake. He bought it brand new in the early 1990s. It is still bolted to the pallet. And he said, well, I'm not using it, so why don't you? I didn't buy it. I wanted to buy it, but he says you can board as long as you want, which is great. So this will actually bend 48 inches of 16 gauge. It's made in the US. It's not made out of Chinesium. I know it probably could have went somewhere like Princess Auto or Busy Bee or whatever, but it's a good old made in the US one. So I think it's just going to take a little bit of elbow grease and some cleanup and whatnot. There's nothing stuck on it whatsoever. In next week's episode, I'll probably make a stand for it and get it cleaned up and then put it up against the back wall. But that's it for this episode. Like I said, worked on Brenda's Roadster, the camera lady's Roadster, and then next week we'll be doing a little more of the same. Please come watch. Please come see us next week. Please like, share, tag, and subscribe. Send me your comments, and see you next week.